The funeral ended quietly in Kisumu, Kenya, but the cold did not come from the weather. It came from the people. Chairs scraped the floor as family members moved from the graveside into the house, their black clothes still dusty. Someone whispered that the lawyer had arrived. The will would be read now. Too soon, aching thought. Her chest still hurt, like she had been holding her breath since morning. She sat near the back of the room, hands folded, eyes swollen but dry. She had cried alone the night before, so now there were no tears left. People talked over her head, passing plates of tea and mandatsi. No one asked how she was doing. No one met her eyes. It felt familiar, like childhood all over again. McKenna walked in late, heels clicking, dressed sharp and confident. She looked calm, almost proud, like today was a victory she had prepared for. When she smiled, relatives smiled back. A few even nodded at her, as if already congratulating her for something unsaid. Aching noticed how McKenna chose a seat at the front, close to the lawyer, close to their mother. Ruth Otieno sat stiffly beside McKenna, her face tight. When Aching looked at her, hoping for even a small sign, Ruth turned away. She kept adjusting her scarf, clearing her throat, pretending to listen to someone else. The distance felt louder than any insult. As the room settled, a strange tension filled the air. It hummed between breaths, between glances, between old memories that never healed. Aching felt invisible, but also watched, like everyone was waiting for something to happen. She lowered her eyes and reminded herself why she was here. Not for money, not for approval, just to say goodbye properly. The lawyer cleared his throat and opened the file, and the room went quiet in a way that felt heavy. Everyone leaned forward a little, like they were about to hear a secret. Aching sat still, her back straight, her hands resting in her lap. She told herself not to expect anything. Expecting had only ever hurt her. The lawyer began to read her father's will in a calm, steady voice. First it was just formal words, dates and names. Then he said McKenna's name. The room seemed to wake up. McKenna Otieno is to receive $15 million. A soft gasp moved through the room, followed by murmurs that quickly turned into smiles. The lawyer continued, listing properties in Nairobi and Mombasa, investment accounts, shares in businesses Aching had only heard about in family whispers. Each sentence felt like another door closing. McKenna sat taller with every word, her lips pressed together in a small, controlled smile, like she had known this all along. Ruth Otieno nodded slowly, proudly, as if the lawyer was confirming a decision she herself had made. She reached out and touched McKenna's arm, squeezing it once. "You deserve it," she said, not quietly enough. A few relatives nodded in agreement. Then the clapping started. It wasn't loud or joyful, but it was there. Polite applause. Careful applause. The kind that still cuts deep. Someone whispered, "Your father really knew what he was doing." Another voice said, "McKenna always took care of the family." Each word landed on Aching like a small stone. The lawyer kept reading, but Aching barely heard him. Her ears rang. She stared at the floor, watching a crack in the tile that looked like it had been there for years. She thought of nights when her father came home tired and quiet, when she made him tea and sat beside him without speaking. She thought of how she never asked for anything, because she didn't want to be a burden. Finally the lawyer paused and looked up. "As for Aching Otieno," he began. The room went silent again. He stopped, turned a page, cleared his throat once more. At this point, there is no direct financial allocation listed. No direct financial allocation. The words sounded clean and polite, but they burned. Aching felt heat rush to her face, but she didn't move. No one clapped this time. Whispers filled the space instead. "Nothing?" someone asked softly. "After all these years?" Another voice said, "She was always the difficult one." Someone else sighed, "At least she has family." McKenna finally turned to Aching, her expression soft and practiced. She leaned over and touched her hand. "Don't worry," she said gently, loud enough for others to hear. "We'll take care of you." Aching pulled her hand back slowly. Inside, old wounds cracked open. Years of being overlooked. Years of being told to wait, to understand, to be patient. She looked at her mother, hoping, just once, for defense. Ruth didn't look at her. She only said, "Your sister deserves everything. You should be grateful." Aching swallowed hard and nodded. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But something inside her shifted. The room thought the story was over. It wasn't. The room slowly filled with low voices again, like nothing serious had just happened. Chairs shifted. Cups clinked. People started breathing normally. Only Aching felt like the air had left her lungs. She sat there quietly, her face calm, her heart loud inside her chest. McKenna moved closer and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. It looked kind from a distance. If someone didn't know their history, they might think it was love. McKenna's voice dropped into that soft, caring tone she used in front of others. "I know this is hard," she said. "But you know I'll always look out for you." Aching nodded slightly, not trusting her voice. She could feel the weight of McKenna's hand, warm and heavy, like a reminder of who had won. It wasn't comfort. It was control. One by one, relatives came over. Some patted her back. Some squeezed her hands. Their words sounded gentle, but each one cut deeper than the last. "Be grateful you still have family," an aunt said. "Money isn't everything," an uncle added, while standing under a chandelier bought with family money. Another cousin smiled awkwardly and whispered, "At least you don't have to worry about responsibility." Aching listened without reacting. She had learned a long time ago that reacting only made things worse. Then her mother spoke. Ruth didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You were always difficult," she said, shaking her head slightly. "You questioned too much. You never knew your place. Your sister understood respect." The words hit harder than the will. Aching felt something twist inside her, sharp and familiar. Difficult. That was the word they used when she asked why McKenna got new shoes and she didn't. When she asked why her opinions were called attitude. When she asked why love always came with conditions. Her mind drifted back to childhood. Sitting alone at school events while her mother clapped for McKenna. Learning to cook early because a girl like you needs to be useful. Being told to stay quiet when adults spoke. Being praised only when she stayed invisible. She remembered nights she went to bed hungry because she didn't want to ask for more. Birthdays that passed with no cake. Report cards folded and hidden because no one cared to see them. And every time she tried to speak up, the same words came back to her. "You are too much. You are ungrateful. You are difficult." Aching looked around the room. Faces that had watched her grow. Faces that had never stepped in. Now they watched her again, waiting for tears. Waiting for anger. Waiting for her to prove the story they had already written about her. But she didn't. She kept her face calm. Her back straight. Her hands steady in her lap. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She didn't cry. Because she knew something they didn't. Silence had been her teacher for years. It had taught her how to survive without applause. How to stand without support. How to swallow pain and turn it into strength. So she sat there, quiet and composed, while humiliation wrapped around the room like smoke. And for the first time, her silence wasn't weakness. It was control. The lawyer lifted his hand slightly, a small signal, but it stopped the room. Conversations faded. Cups were set down. Even the whispers died out. He looked back at the papers in front of him, then up at everyone gathered there, his expression calm but firm. Aching noticed the pause before anyone else did. It was the kind of pause that carries weight. Her heart skipped, but she kept her face still. She had already learned not to hope. Ruth shifted in her seat. "If that's all," she said quickly, forcing a thin smile, "we can finish this later. Everyone is tired." She glanced at McKenna, then at the relatives, as if trying to protect the moment they were enjoying. The lawyer shook his head. "I'm afraid we're not finished yet," he said evenly. "There is more to read." McKenna let out a soft laugh and leaned back in her chair. Her lips curled into a small smirk. To her this sounded like formal leftovers. Technical details. Nothing that could change what had already been decided. She crossed her arms, relaxed, confident. The room followed her energy, settling back into expectation rather than curiosity. Aking watched quietly. She noticed how McKenna avoided looking at her now, as if she had already been dismissed from the story. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and turned another page. The sound of paper was loud in the silence. "This section," he said, "was placed deliberately at the end of the reading." Ruth's smile faded. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharper now. "We've heard enough. My husband's wishes are clear." The lawyer met her eyes without blinking. "With respect, Mrs. Otieno, I am legally required to read the will in full." Something in his tone made the room uneasy. A few relatives shifted in their seats. Someone cleared their throat. The confidence in the air began to thin. McKenna's smirk stayed, but it tightened. She leaned forward slightly, her fingers tapping her knee. "Let him read," she said lightly. "It won't change anything." The lawyer nodded once and continued. His voice slowed, each word chosen carefully. It was no longer just a list of assets. Sounded more personal now, more intentional. Aking felt it then. A quiet pull in her chest. Not hope, not fear, just awareness. Like the moment before a storm, when the air feels different but the sky hasn't changed yet. Ruth's hands began to tremble in her lap. He tried again. "This is unnecessary," she said. "We can discuss the rest privately." "I'm sorry," the lawyer replied. "That would be inappropriate." The room was fully silent now. No whispers, no clapping, no movement at all. McKenna's smile finally faltered. Just a little. Her eyes narrowed, studying the lawyer's face, searching for reassurance that wasn't there. The confidence she wore so easily moments ago began to slip. The lawyer took a slow breath. "That is not all," he said. The words landed heavily, like a door closing behind them. Aking remained still, her expression unchanged. But inside something shifted again. Not triumph, not relief. Truth was coming, and this time no one could interrupt it. The lawyer reached into the folder and slowly pulled out an envelope. It was old, thick, and sealed with red wax that had cracked with time. The room leaned forward as one. Even the air felt tighter. "This letter," the lawyer said gently, "was written by your father in his own hand. He asked that it be read only after the main allocations." Ruth's face drained of color. "A letter," she whispered, as if the word itself scared her. McKenna let out a small laugh, light and nervous. "Daddy always loved drama," she said, brushing it off. But her fingers were clenched in her lap. The lawyer broke the seal. The soft tear of paper sounded louder than it should have. He unfolded the letter carefully and began to read. "My children," the letter started. "If you are hearing this, then I am gone, and my silence can finally speak." Aking felt her throat tighten. That voice. She could hear her father in every word. "I know what this room looks like right now. I know who feels chosen and who feels forgotten. And I need to tell you the truth before my absence is mistaken for neglect." McKenna's smile stiffened. Ruth stared straight ahead, not blinking. "I gave McKenna money first because money is what she understands," the letter continued. "She has always measured love in applause and approval. I did not want her to feel abandoned, even though she never saw how much she already had." A few relatives exchanged uneasy glances. "And Aking," the lawyer read on, his voice steady, "I tested you through silence not because you were weak, but because you were strong." Aking's breath caught. Her hands trembled, but she kept them folded. "You lived without praise, without protection, without fairness. I saw it all. I heard the words spoken when no one thought I was listening. I watched you learn to survive quietly, and it broke my heart." Ruth's lips parted slightly. Her skin had gone pale, almost gray. "I stayed silent longer than I should have," the letter said. "That is my failure as a father. But I needed to know one thing before I trusted my life's work to anyone. I needed to know who could stand without money holding them up." McKenna laughed again, sharper this time. "This is ridiculous," she said, shaking her head. "He's gone. Why bring this up now?" But no one joined her laughter. "Aking never asked," the letter continued. "She never begged. She never performed. She loved without conditions. She endured without witnesses. And that is why I protected her the only way I knew how, by watching quietly and preparing in secret. Ruth's hands began to shake openly now. She pressed them together, as if praying for the words to stop. This letter is not meant to shame, the lawyer read. It is meant to reveal, because silence can look like nothing, until it becomes everything. McKenna's laugh faded into a tight smile. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for support. None came. Aking sat still, tears finally filling her eyes but not falling. For the first time in her life, someone had seen her fully. Not as difficult, not as ungrateful, but as worthy. And the truth, once spoken, could not be folded back into an envelope. The lawyer let the silence settle before he spoke again. He placed the letter carefully back on the table, as if it were something fragile. Then he reached for another set of documents, thinner but neatly arranged, and slid them forward. Now, he said calmly, we will address the remaining assets. McKenna straightened in her chair, forcing her smile back into place. She looked ready to reclaim the room. Aking didn't move. Her heart was beating fast, but her face stayed calm, almost distant. These documents, the lawyer continued, confirm the transfer of controlling shares of a private holding company. Ruth frowned. What company? She asked sharply. The lawyer glanced down at the page. OTNO Holdings Limited. Established 12 years ago. A murmur ran through the room. No one had heard that name before. The majority shares, he said, lifting his eyes, have been transferred to Aking OTNO. The words didn't rush in. They settled slow and heavy. McKenna laughed once, short and disbelieving. That's not possible, she said. I would know. The lawyer didn't react. The company was intentionally kept out of public records and family discussions. Your father was very clear about that. He turned another page. OTNO Holdings owns several commercial assets, including the land on which 3 residential luxury properties currently stand. Ruth's breath caught. What land? She whispered. The lawyer named the addresses. McKenna's smile vanished. Not faded, vanished. Her face drained of color as realization struck. Those addresses were hers. The houses everyone admired. The home she had bragged about, photographed, celebrated. The structures belong to McKenna, the lawyer explained, but the land beneath them belongs to the company. And the company belonged to Aking. The room exploded into whispers. Someone stood up. Someone else sat back down slowly, as if their legs had stopped working. Ruth pressed a hand to her chest, eyes wide, finally turning to look at Aking properly for the first time that day. Aking met her gaze calmly. This transfer, the lawyer continued, grants Aking full controlling authority. Decisions regarding leasing, development, or sale of the land require her approval. Ruth's lips trembled. All this time, she whispered. Memories flashed across her face. The harsh words, the favoritism, the confidence that came from believing one child was valuable and the other was not. She saw it now. She had been wrong. Completely. McKenna pushed back her chair, standing abruptly. This is a mistake, she said, her voice shaking. My father would never. He did, the lawyer replied gently. And he documented everything. He slid another paper forward. This was finalized years ago. McKenna stared at the documents as if they might disappear if she didn't believe in them. Her hands shook. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Aking finally looked down at the papers. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She felt something quieter than joy. Security. Not borrowed. Not gifted. Earned through endurance. Ruth sank back into her chair, tears filling her eyes. I didn't know, she said, her voice breaking. Aking looked at her mother, then away. Some realizations come too late to heal everything. The room felt different now. The power had shifted, silently, without drama. And McKenna knew it. So did everyone else. For a few seconds no one spoke. The kind of silence that presses on your ears. Then McKenna snapped. This is a lie, she screamed, her voice cutting through the room. All of it. This is some sick joke. She pointed at the lawyer, her whole body shaking. You planned this. You twisted his words. You're stealing what's mine. The lawyer remained seated, calm, his hands folded neatly on the table. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't react. McKenna turned toward her mother, eyes wild. "You knew," she shouted. "You knew and you let this happen. You let him do this to me." Her words came fast and sharp, like she was trying to stab the air. Ruth stood up suddenly, panicked. "McKenna, please," she begged, reaching out. "Lower your voice. This is not the place." Her hands trembled as much as her voice. "Please, let's stop this. We've heard enough." McKenna laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. "Stop. Now you want to stop." She spun around, pointing at the empty chair where her father's photo stood nearby. "You hear this? Even now you're trying to control me. Even from the grave." Her voice cracked. "You promised me everything." Aking watched silently. She felt like an outsider inside her own family, observing a storm she didn't cause. McKenna turned back to the lawyer. "Read something else," she demanded. "There must be another page. Another version." Her voice dropped suddenly, almost pleading. "Please." The lawyer opened the file again, unbothered by the chaos. "There is nothing left to reinterpret," he said gently. "Only what has already been written." Ruth rushed forward, her eyes wet. "Sir," she said desperately, "can we pause this? My daughter is upset. We can talk privately. This is too much." "I understand this is painful," the lawyer replied calmly, "but my responsibility is to the truth, not comfort." McKenna slammed her fist on the table. "You ruined my life," she screamed. "I did everything right. I was the good daughter. I followed the rules." Her voice broke completely now. "I earned this." The lawyer looked at her steadily. "Your father anticipated this reaction," he said softly. "That is why everything was finalized long before today." Those words crushed what little hope McKenna had left. She shook her head over and over. "No," she whispered. "No, he wouldn't do this to me." But he had. McKenna collapsed back into her chair, breathing hard, her makeup smudged, her strength draining away in front of everyone. The room felt heavy with reality. The lawyer closed the file with a quiet click. "The decisions are legally binding," he said. "They cannot be reversed." Aking felt a strange calm settle over her. No triumph, no joy, just clarity. The screaming had changed nothing. The begging had changed nothing. The truth stood firm, untouched by anger or regret. And for the first time, McKenna understood what Aking had lived with all her life: powerless silence. The lawyer opened the letter again, his movements slow and careful, as if he knew every word carried weight. The room, already shaken, grew still once more. Even McKenna stopped crying. Everyone sensed that what was coming next would change how they remembered the past. "There is more," the lawyer said quietly. "Your father asked that this part be read only if emotions overtook reason." Ruth stiffened. The lawyer read on. "I need to speak of what was hidden behind closed doors. Of words that wounded. Of favoritism that became a form of harm." A low breath moved through the room. Someone shifted uncomfortably. "I watched how Aking was spoken to," the letter continued. "How her silence was mistaken for obedience. How her questions were punished, while her sister's demands were rewarded." Ruth's face tightened. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "This was not discipline," the letter said. "It was imbalance. And imbalance becomes abuse when it steals a child's sense of worth." The word abuse hung in the air like smoke. A few relatives glanced at Ruth, then at Aking, seeing old memories differently now. "I protected Aking quietly because loud protection would have made things worse," the lawyer read. "I saw how anger followed her honesty. I chose patience, hoping time would soften hearts. It did not." Ruth lowered her eyes. "Money was never meant to be power in this family," the letter went on. "It was meant to be responsibility. I gave wealth where I feared collapse, and control where I saw strength." Aking's chest tightened. She had never known her father saw her that way. Around the room, faces changed. An aunt frowned, remembering harsh words she had laughed at. An uncle shifted, thinking of moments he had ignored. Someone whispered, We didn't know, but knowing now did not erase the past. This is why I moved in silence, the letter continued. Not to punish one child, but to protect another. Because protection is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like absence. Ruth finally spoke, her voice shaking. That's not how it was, she said weakly. But even she sounded unsure. No one rushed to defend her. The room had turned, not with shouting but with understanding. Relatives looked at aching differently now. Not as difficult, not as ungrateful, but as someone who had carried more than anyone realized. One cousin wiped her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was saying it to. The lawyer folded the letter slowly. Your father wanted the truth to stand on its own, he said. Did. Too late to fix childhood. Too late to undo favoritism. Too late to protect a girl who had already grown strong without help. Aching remained silent. She didn't need apologies. She didn't need blame shifted. The past had finally come back, and it had spoken clearly. The room was no longer calm. Voices overlapped. Relatives argued in low, sharp tones. Some defended Ruth, others blamed her. A few stared at McKenna, unsure what to say now that the truth had stripped away her shine. The air felt thick with regret and anger, like everyone wanted to rewrite the last 20 years at once. Aching sat quietly through it all. She felt eyes on her waiting for anger, waiting for a speech, waiting for her to finally release everything she had held inside for so long. This was the moment people expected revenge. They expected her to stand up and remind everyone of every wound, to point fingers, to win loudly. But she didn't. She took a slow breath and stood. The room fell silent again, as if her movement mattered more than all the shouting before it. She didn't look at McKenna. She didn't look at her mother. She walked toward the table where the lawyer sat. Thank you, she said simply. The lawyer nodded, understanding more than words could explain. Ruth took a step toward her. Aching, she said, her voice breaking. We should talk. Aching paused, but she didn't turn around. Not today, she replied gently. There was no anger in her voice, just certainty. McKenna laughed bitterly. So that's it, she snapped. You win and walk away. Aching turned then, meeting her sister's eyes for the first time since everything fell apart. This was never a competition, she said quietly. I already lived without what you're losing. The words landed softly, and somehow that made them sharper. She picked up her bag and moved toward the door. Behind her, voices rose again. Accusations. Defenses. Old arguments repeating themselves in new forms. The family was tearing itself apart, and for once, she wasn't in the middle of it. When she reached the doorway, she stopped for a second, not to look back, just to breathe. Silence followed her out. Outside, the air felt lighter. The sky was wide and open, like it didn't care about inheritance or regret. She felt something unfamiliar in her chest. She didn't shout. She didn't celebrate. She didn't punish anyone with words. She punished them with absence. Because silence, when chosen, is powerful. And walking away without bitterness hurts more than any scream ever could. Aching stepped forward and closed the door behind her. Not hard, not softly, just firmly. And for the first time, she left with her dignity intact. The lake in Naivasha was calm that morning, stretched wide and quiet like it was holding its breath. Aching stood near the water with her shoes in her hand, the cool ground steady beneath her feet. For the first time in days, no one was talking to her. No one was judging. No one was waiting for her to explain herself. She watched the water move gently and thought about everything that had happened. The will, the shouting, the truth that came too late to fix the past but came just in time to free her from it. People would say she inherited wealth, power, control. But standing there, none of that felt important. What her father really left her was space. Space to breathe without apology. Space to live without being compared. Space to choose silence without being called weak. He didn't give her attention when she was young, and that hurt. But now she understood something deeper. He gave her preparation. She had learned how to stand alone long before she was ever alone. She had learned how to survive without comfort, how to build strength without applause. While others were protected by money, she was shaped by patience. The wind moved across the lake, cool and clean. Aking closed her eyes and let it touch her face. She felt light, not because she had gained something but because she had finally stopped carrying what never belonged to her. She thought of her father not with anger, but with quiet understanding. He trusted her enough to wait. Trusted her enough to let her grow without shortcuts. Trusted her enough to leave her last. A small smile touched her lips. People thought love was money. They thought silence meant weakness. But her father didn't leave her less. He left her last, so she could rise without asking anyone.